So, Arkansas is a crime thriller directed by, of all people, Clark Duke, which additionally has Clark Duke playing a role in this film as well. Now, you might know Clark Duke as kind of the youngest cast member from Hot Tub Time Machine. You've seen him around in like a few films like Superbad and Kick Ass. He's had small roles in other films. But here, he's not only playing a pretty damn good role, but this is his directorial debut. And I gotta say, he does an immaculate job of staging this kind of intersecting lives crime thriller, divided up into chapters that works so well. I mean, it's written so well. I mean, it helps that it's based on a book by John Brandon, but at the same time, the way that he weaves the story so well and gives it a lot of contemplation. I think it's an amazing discovery. I mean, who knew? So Arkansas, it takes place between two different time periods. Between like the 1980s up to the present, we follow Vince Vaughn's character, who is Frog. Now, Frog is he starts off as a pawn shop owner and then just comes into finding some drugs and decides like, well, maybe I can sell this too. Maybe I can sell some drugs. So he contacts the right people, and he soon finds himself in a new line of work, doing drug dealing and amassing an empire from that. And like Frog, I love the way that they establish Frog as a character who is smart enough to know how far he should go into this type of world. Like he's smart enough to know, just the right people to contact, but also cautious enough to know, I got to bring a gun if I'm going to be doing this kind of work. There are going to be people after me, and I got to be willing to take them down if they're going to do that. And I got to keep my head low, like very low. Like I know that, we're dealing drugs within Arkansas and that it seems to be going swimmingly, but he keeps his head very, very low. Like at one point, he basically, once he gets far enough, he just hands it off to someone else and realizes, you know what? I'm smart enough to know, when to cash out here. So, I'm just going to hand this business over to these guys and I'm just going to retire. So then we go over to like the present day and we cut back and forth between these two stories. And we have a new batch of criminals dealing in drugs. So we have Liam Hemsworth, who plays Kyle, who is fairly new to the job, and he's paired up with Clark Duke's character of Swin. Odd name. And the film points out that it's a very odd name. Now, Swin is... he's so bizarre. Like, he's got sunglasses, he wears loud shirts, he has a mustache, and he basically believes that he's charismatic enough that everyone will be his friend. Says, like, everyone likes me. Everyone will be my friend. And it seems like it works out well enough for him where apparently at one point he picks up a woman in the grocery store. And he's like fairly forceful on her. Like he's not trying to be too domineering, but like he just like protrudes his way right into the conversation. And before he knows it, they have a relationship after a few weeks. So can you tell which role Clark Duke wanted to write for himself in this? So they end up working for a park ranger, played by John Malkovich. And John Malkovich's character is basically, you know what? I'm smart enough to do this. Here's what's going to happen. You guys are going to be park rangers. You're going to work under this, this new job title. That'll be your alias. And then you'll run drugs every now and then. Except John Malkovich, one drug deal goes wrong. And before he knows it, Malkovich is dead. And the two are left wondering, well, what do we do now? How do we run the empire? And they basically try to find the best way to go about it while not trying to be either picked up by the authorities or by a rival crime syndicate. And this is sort of where like the lines of Frog and Swin and Kyle meet. Is basically their worlds kind of like intersect, that by the end of the film they basically have their confrontation. And there's a lot of mistakes that happen along the way because it's crime, it's messy, and people end up getting murdered along the way. Now I love the way that this like the film is divided up into chapters. So like one chapter, the first chapter will start off with Tyler and Swin, and then the next chapter will go back to Frog in the 80s, and then we'll go back to the present and figure out, what the two guys are doing once they work on their empire, and then back to Frog, back and forth until they eventually connect. And what I love about the way that they play out these scenes is that they leave a lot of room for quiet contemplation there. Like there are a lot of moments with Frog where he chooses his words wisely. And like you can definitely tell, like even before I read the credits, you could tell this was based on a novel just by the way it's written. The way that they have these sort of like meandering bits of dialogue, which build character and feel kind of like free flowing and believable enough that people would talk this way in real life, even if even when dealing within drugs. And there's a lot of room in there to basically build up these characters and think about, which direction they're going with their lives. Like, I love the fact that because Frog is so smart, we get all these moments where he's just thinking just about what move to make next. Like, there's a brilliantly tense moment where he's basically going to meet a supplier. And he has contacted this. He has a contact who is connecting him with this guy, but he's not sure if he can trust him. So he's got his hand behind his back, reaching for his gun, and the supplier is doing the same. He also has his hand on his gun while he's trying to confirm that Frog is the person he's expecting. And so there's like this great air of intelligence to these criminals, where it feels like the mistakes they make kind of just like happen. Like usually within these crime thriller pictures, like someone will make a mistake and you can generally look at that picture and say, well, here's the problem, like they made this mistake and trusting this person, or they got too cocky in this area. Here it just seems like it happens by proximity, just from like the nature of their work, who they associate with. Like the murder of John Malkovich's character kind of just comes like seemingly from random. Like it seems like, the person who tried to kill him, they tried to make all the right moves they could with this person, and yet it still ended up, messy, and, people die along the way and it gets tragic. It's very much akin to, like, I wasn't quite going to say it, but it felt like this film was very much akin to Fargo without any jokes. There's some like smile-worthy moments here and there, but it's not played up for darkly comedic purposes. Like you can tell, like it's trying to go for more of the darker and grittier aspects here. But the way that it has the intersecting lives and the conversations that are not so much about work and the contemplation out of what you want out of life. Like there are several passages here where Frog is just literally talking about what he wants to do, as opposed to just like selling drugs. Like even the people that he hands his business over to, one of the very first conversations he has with them is like, where do you want to go with this in your life? What is the big thing that you want? And it seems like Frog more or less knows that by the end, but it's like a question you can't quite answer until you get further enough along in life. So yeah, just immaculate performances here. Like this is probably one of my favorite Liam Hemsworth performances ever. Clark Duke just eases so perfectly into this role of just this cocky guy who believes that he is charismatic enough that anyone can be his friend, which usually works out in this type of film because it's Clark Duke's film. And just Vince Vaughn just gives this perfectly nuanced and quiet performance. Like he's done this a lot in recent years. I've noticed in like films like Dragged Across Concrete, that he has been favoring these roles where he's very more quiet and contemplative, and you're just wondering what's going through his head, where he's not quite that manic Vaughn that we've seen in all of his comedies. So yeah, it does a great job building up this world and this setting. It kind of has like a little bit of this almost kind of like David Lynch ambiance, to when we're just sort of like lingering with the characters on their drives where they don't say anything, or their dinners where it seems like they're connecting well, or even just the tense showdowns. Like at one point there's someone who just won't stop coming to the park and harassing both like Kyle and Swin, and they're trying to figure out like who this guy is and what he wants, but he won't say it, and then he just keeps harassing them. and eventually they kill him in a manner that is shocking and also kind of expected, because you feel like this was like the inevitability, and yet once you get to that point it's still horrifying once it happens. So yeah, this was a very capable, very surprisingly good film, from Clark Duke. So I'm kind of like surprised. I'm kind of interested to see what he'll do next, especially with a film this good as his directorial debut. It never feels like it's trying too hard to sort of be that kind of like, you know, intersecting lives, Fargo type of crime thriller. It always feels like it has this ease going about it to each scene, where it feels like it knows what it's trying to say within each scene. That yeah, I really dug this film. I was genuinely surprised. I didn't even see the trailer or anything when I was going into this, and I was pleasantly surprised by what I ended up with. So, for Arkansas, 4 out of 5 stars.